That night at Magnolia Hall in Charleston, the ballroom glittered with golden lights, when suddenly the music stopped cold. Madison, the bride in a pristine white gown, struck me hard across the face. The sharp crack echoed, and my glasses flew from my face, shattering into pieces on the marble floor. 182 guests froze in silence. Not a breath, not a move. Madison leaned in, eyes blazing with rage, and screamed, "Hand over the keys to your apartment." Daniel, my son, only lowered his head toward his shoes, his shoulders trembling, unable to utter a single word of defense. The room fell into a dreadful hush, broken only by the pounding of my heart inside my chest. I swallowed hard, my hand shaking as I held the phone. My voice was soft but firm. "Victor, come to Magnolia Hall in 30 minutes, bring every document." The other end was silent for a few seconds before answering. "Are you sure?" I whispered, "Yes. Tonight is the time." What they didn't know was that the apartment Madison so greedily demanded was only the cheapest piece of the picture I had hidden for 2 decades. For 3 years, I had secretly paid off Daniel and Madison's debts, totaling $186,000, and even signed as guarantor for the entire $68,500 wedding bill. But tonight, all of it would be erased. The only question left hanging in that suffocating air: why was the woman they thought poor and fragile holding the couple's deadliest weakness on their wedding night? And what would turn a lavish celebration into a public courtroom before every guest? My name is Eleanor Brooks. 10 years of widowhood taught me how to walk slowly through the old streets of Charleston, breathe in the salt air on Broad Street, and smile when people assumed I lived only on a pension. 3 days a week, I arranged flowers at Harbor Blooms, my hands familiar with the scent of lavender and the snip of shears. I drove an 11-year-old sedan, wore sweaters bought from outlet stores each season. People looked at me and believed I was so ordinary, the wind could pass through and forget me. What they didn't know was that Richard, my late husband, had been a discreet investor, that we chose to live quietly wealthy, never flashy, never loud, to stay safe and to stay true. One afternoon, Daniel brought Madison to my condo in south of Broad. The windows opened toward the Ashley River, the sunset gilding the old anchors. Madison walked in like an appraiser, eyes sweeping over the high ceilings, the private elevator, the covered parking. She smiled, called it cozy, but stretched the word in a nasal tone that turned it into cheap. I heard the soft rub of my sweater's buttons as I set the teapot down, keeping my voice gentle. "Do you find this place warm enough?" Madison pressed her lips. "Warm, but you should think about somewhere more suited for your age." Daniel chuckled awkwardly, adding, "Mom, I just worry about you climbing stairs." That was the first prick. Madison eyed my coat, shook her head, outdated. She glanced at my car, smirked, dangerous for seniors, and every week without fail, a brochure for senior living appeared neatly on the dining table. Daniel repeated like a recorder, "Mom, it's for your safety." I stayed quiet, opened my notebook. I began writing down the dates and times of each cutting remark, each time they coincidentally brought a realtor through the hall, each strange car parked outside. Every dot in that notebook marked one more push to drive me from my home. One afternoon, while standing in the kitchen, I overheard Madison whispering on the phone to her mother. "Her place is prime real estate. If we move her to something smaller, we can stay there until we buy." I froze, hand still on the kettle, listening to the water boil as my heart turned cold. I called Amelia Ward, an old friend in real estate, asking her to check Daniel and Madison's finances. The next day, she sent me a brief report that cut like a knife. Maxed out credit cards, 3 months late on rent, car loans consuming over half their income. The wedding ahead was mostly debt. Worse, they'd even inquired about elder financial power of attorney and asked about a mortgage against assets that belonged to me. I read every line carefully and placed it inside a brown envelope. Evidence Financial, 8:42 a.m., Amelia Ward's report summarizing overdue debts and inquiry on power of attorney. On the other side of this story lay my secret. I still worked, still cooked chicken soup, still paid the power bill on time. But in the safe rested silent numbers, $6.2 million in investments, a small office building on King Street bringing in $42,000 a month, an oceanfront lot at Isle of Palms listening to waves. For 3 years, I quietly transferred $5,000 each month to Daniel and Madison, totaling $186,000. I signed as guarantor for their lease, and I covered the full $68,500 deposit for the wedding so Daniel wouldn't bow to loan sharks. I thought I was saving my son from falling. Instead, I wove a net that kept him from ever learning how to stand. Evidence: bank, 9:15 a.m., statements of monthly $5,000 transfers for 36 months. Evidence: legal, 10:22 a.m., Magnolia Hall guarantor contract worth $68,500. Days later, their campaign shifted from whispers to pressure. Madison carried a binder into my living room, a plan to sell the condo, a glossy brochure for a $2,700 all-inclusive senior residence with activity schedules. She spoke flatly, like pitching to a client. You'll have 24-hour care, friends your age, full meals. This is for your mental health. Daniel sat beside her, hands clasped. Mom, please. I asked one question. And who will live in my condo? Madison smiled, eyes unblinking. We'll stay there temporarily until we buy our own. I heard the faint rattle of the window as river winds pressed against the glass. I closed my notebook, knowing my silence had reached its limit. That evening, Walter Green, my longtime neighbor, dropped by with fresh bread. He sat down, lowered his voice as if walls had ears. I saw Madison with a man carrying a measuring stick on your balcony, checking sunlight. I nodded, picked up my pen, and wrote his words as if hammering a nail into wood. Evidence: witness, 6:05 p.m., Walter's statement about Madison bringing a man to measure the balcony. I called Victor Hale, once Richard's closest financial and legal advisor. His voice was steady, grave. Are you ready, Eleanor? I answered, not yet, but I need to prepare. We agreed on a package of documents, canceling transfers, canceling the lease guarantee, canceling the event guarantee, and drafting a new will. All sealed inside the brown envelope, locked in the second drawer. Evidence: legal, 7:40 p.m., Victor's document list and schedule for unsealing. A week before the wedding, the Clarks hosted a family meeting in my condo. Madison's father spoke with a businessman's tone. At your age, living alone is a risk. That $2,700 package is reasonable. Madison's mother smiled sweetly, adding that I should think of Daniel and future grandchildren. Daniel looked at me, muttering, Mom, they're right. I poured tea, set a cup before each of them, then asked the same question again. And who will live in my condo? Silence. Only the ticking clock filled the room. I smiled politely, ending the meeting. They left feeling victorious, but I walked straight to the second drawer, touched the brown envelope. That night, I sat alone on the balcony, the river winds carrying salt and the faint crash of waves against the seawall. I thought of Richard, his words. Living quietly wealthy isn't about fearing people. It's about protecting yourself from bottomless greed. I had honored his words long enough, but some days, silence is betrayal of yourself. I dialed Victor. When I call, come immediately. He replied, 30 minutes. I hung up, set the phone on the table, stared at the wedding invitation glinting under the lamp, Daniel and Madison's names embossed in gold. The light shimmered like water. I knew that night would come. I just didn't know which gust would kill the music, signaling the game to begin. And then, inside Magnolia Hall, that gust arrived sooner than I ever imagined. The MC had just raised his glass to toast the newlyweds when Madison, her wedding gown sweeping the floor, marched straight toward me. The carefully painted smile on her face vanished, replaced by eyes cold as steel. Hand over the keys to your apartment. I heard every word clearly, even though music and clinking glasses still echoed around the room. I drew a breath, shook my head. No. Crack! Her hand struck my cheek, my glasses slid from my face, shattering on the marble floor. 182 guests froze. Some covered their mouths, others turned away, but all stood silent. Daniel, my son, didn't rush to catch me, didn't say a word. He stared down at his shoes, his hands trembling. In that moment, I knew everything had collapsed. I bent down, picked up the broken pieces of glass, then turned and quietly walked out of the room. The phone in my hand shook with the rhythm of my heart. I called Victor Hale. 30 minutes. Come to Magnolia Hall. Bring every file. Cancel transfers. Cancel lease guarantee. Cancel event guarantee. Draft the new will. Victor's voice weighed heavy on the line. Eleanor, are you certain? My answer was short, certain. Tonight is the time. My old sedan sat still in the lot, like a loyal friend waiting. I slid into the driver's seat and opened the brown envelope resting in the glove box. Inside were the records of 3 years of silence. Bank statements showing $5,000 transfers every month to Daniel and Madison. Evidence, financial, 9:15 a.m., 36 months of continuous bank transfers. The guarantee letter bearing my signature, securing their lease. Evidence, legal, 10:05 a.m., landlord guarantee letter. The ballroom contract, signed in my name with a $68,500 deposit. Evidence, legal, 10:22 a.m., Magnolia Hall contract. And photos I had taken on my phone. Madison smirking at a realtor measuring the condo. Daniel sitting mute as insults rained, the fresh bruise on my cheek after words turned to violence. Evidence, photo, 7:40 p.m., bruise on left cheek taken right after the slap. I called Walter Green, my trusted neighbor who had witnessed what I could not document alone. Walter, can you grab the green folder from my second drawer? Inside are the deed, the trust, and the bruise photos. Bring them here immediately. Walter's reply was short, on my way. I knew I needed him. A witness of integrity, no blood ties, no agenda. Sitting in the car, the yellow glow of streetlights fell across the windshield. I heard my own whisper, like an oath to my conscience. Tonight, I won't retaliate with humiliation. I'll pull back the safety net I built. Those who sow debt will reap debt. Those who humiliate in public will face the truth in public. No turning back, no pity could save Daniel and Madison now. Headlights blazed at the end of the lot. Victor's Mercedes turned in, tires crunching on the asphalt. He stepped out, carrying his black leather briefcase, his face stern. I opened the door, stepped down, my hands still trembling, but my eyes clear. We sat right there on the hood, beneath the streetlight. Victor opened the case, laying out each prepared document. The transfer cancellation, the lease guarantee revocation, the event guarantee termination, the draft of the new will. I signed each one, black ink spreading like the seal of an ending. Victor closed the folder, looked at me. Once we step back in, there's no way out. I replied, the clock starts now. I clenched the brown envelope in my hand, feeling as if I held my own heart, knowing that in just minutes, all of Magnolia Hall would become a public courtroom. I raised my eyes toward the wedding hall, where music had just started again. They had no idea that in only a few moments, their lavish celebration would be torn apart by truths no one ever imagined. The music inside Magnolia Hall cut off the moment Victor and I stepped through the tall wooden doors. The lavish space, once glowing under chandeliers, now fell silent as if awaiting a verdict about to be read aloud. I felt hundreds of eyes pinning me in place. Phone cameras lit up across the room, flashes popping, capturing each step Victor and I took onto the dance floor. Victor adjusted his tie, his voice calm yet commanding. I am Victor Hale, legal and financial advisor to Mrs. Eleanor Brooks. I have urgent announcements directly concerning Mr. and Mrs. Brooks. The air in the ballroom tightened, then swelled with whispers. Curious, uneasy. Everyone sensed that a scene not written into the wedding program had just begun. Madison curled her lips into a mocking half-smile, trying to mask her panic. So this is it? Another performance? You can't even leave our happiest day alone? I locked my eyes on hers but said nothing. I let Victor, my prosecutor in all but name, deliver the first cut. He drew out a document stamped in red, lifted it high for all to see. First notice, the lease guarantee for Daniel and Madison Brooks has been officially revoked. Their landlord will receive written confirmation tomorrow morning. The two of you now have 30 days to secure a replacement guarantor. Otherwise, your lease will be terminated. A thunderous gasp rolled across the ballroom. Daniel whipped toward me, his face drained of color. Wait, Mom, you were the guarantor? The words tumbled out, but in his eyes I could see recognition. He'd suspected it all along. Now the truth stood exposed before hundreds of witnesses. Madison shrieked, Lies! She couldn't possibly afford it! There's no way! Victor cut her off, crisp and cold, holding up the notarized papers. All valid, effective immediately. His words landed like a life sentence. Daniel trembled, clutching his champagne glass so hard the wine sloshed over his starched white cuff. Guests whispered sharply. So his mother was the one holding their home together. Without her, they're nothing. The murmurs grew louder, a tide of judgment pressing down on the couple who had only just tied the knot. Victor didn't give them a breath of recovery. He unfolded the next sheaf of papers, his tone like a gavel striking wood. Second notice: all monthly transfers of $5,000 made for 36 consecutive months from Mrs. Eleanor Brooks' account to Daniel and Madison Brooks are hereby terminated. The total sum amounts to $186,000. He paused, then articulated each word with precision. These transfers covered rent, credit cards, car insurance, and various living expenses. The room erupted like a storm breaking through glass. Some guests gasped aloud, covering their mouths. Others pulled out their phones, double-checking numbers on screens as though disbelief needed evidence. Daniel muttered, almost choking, "Oh my God." He turned to Madison, voice trembling. "Did you know about this?" Madison glared at me, voice unhinged. "Impossible. She's dirt poor. Everyone knows it. She drives that junk car, wears decade-old sweaters. It's all fake." I remained still, my voice soft, like wind slipping through cracks. In America, the truly wealthy often wear the simplest shoes. What you forget is that appearances can be a shield. A sharp ding sliced through the noise. Guests had pulled up the clip of Madison's earlier slap, replaying it on their phones. The screen glow illuminated her raised hand, the crack of impact, my glasses shattering across marble. One guest whispered, "She really slapped her." The clip spread hand to hand, the buzz swelling, racing like wildfire. Madison screamed over the murmurs, "It's staged, don't believe her. She's trying to destroy our night." But the guests' eyes had already shifted, curiosity turning to outrage, pity to suspicion. A few shook their heads, others leaned toward each other. "This is worse than any drama on TV." Daniel whispered hoarsely, voice breaking, "Madison, have we been living off my mother's money for 3 years?" His question wasn't only for her, it was for himself. Madison clawed at his sleeve, stammering, "Don't listen, I swear." But her words evaporated in the thick air, drowned by the crowd's verdict written across their stares. The atmosphere stretched taut as violin strings. I stood upright, scanning the room. "And this," I said evenly, "is only the beginning." Victor nodded, his eyes glinting with certainty. The ballroom no longer resembled a hall of celebration. It had become a courtroom, where justice was delivered in sharp, merciless cuts. From the back, the Magnolia Hall manager emerged, clutching a thick folder. He strode forward, his face grave. I knew what came next. The third cut would fall, harsher than the rest, right before hundreds of witnesses who could not unsee the truth. The noise inside Magnolia Hall felt as if the air itself had been sucked out. Victor stepped forward, carefully opening his leather briefcase. He pulled out a stamped document, his voice booming beneath the vaulted ceiling. "Ladies and gentlemen, the guarantee worth $68,500 for this wedding reception has been officially revoked. According to contract terms, the venue has the right to demand full payment immediately before guests leave the hall." A wave of murmurs spread across the room. The laughter and chatter of celebration shifted into tense whispers. Many guests set their glasses down quietly, watching. Madison froze, her eyes wide, then screamed, her voice trembling with rage. "What did you just say? That's impossible. This is my wedding. You can't come here and ruin everything." Daniel stood stiff, his lips twitching, as if to form words, but none came out. Some guests turned toward the couple, their gazes mixing pity with contempt. At that moment, Magnolia Hall's manager, Mr. Martinez, stepped out. Dressed in a sharp black suit, contract folder in hand, he bowed slightly to me before turning to Daniel and Madison. His tone was polite yet firm as steel. "I'm sorry, but I have just received official notice. According to our agreement, we have the right to demand payment immediately. Since the guarantee has been revoked, I need to know the replacement payment method right now." A thick silence dropped. Daniel swallowed hard, his eyes reddened, while Madison flailed her arms. "We will settle this after the ceremony. You can't do this in front of everyone." Martinez didn't budge. He repeated, "I'm sorry, the policy is clear. Without payment, I must suspend all services. That means the music will stop, food will no longer be served, and guests will be asked to leave." The ballroom erupted into murmurs. Some guests quickly grabbed their coats, whispering, "Do they really not have the money? With all these people watching." A group of young attendees flipped on their cameras, live streaming the chaos, while online viewers poured in, comments flooding the screen. The atmosphere had shifted from elegant to scandalous, like a public debacle unraveling in real time. I stepped forward, my pace steady, deliberate, every eye fixed on me. My voice rose, clear and unflinching. For 3 years, I stood behind my son. I paid debts, I guaranteed contracts, I covered bills they thought fell from the sky. But tonight, I will no longer hide. Tonight, I will not hold him up. Tonight, I will help him grow. Victor handed me the file. I lifted the statement high, the light reflecting off the printed numbers. Investment account, $6,200,000. An office building on King Street, generating $42,000 a month. An oceanfront lot at Isle of Palms, still appreciating. All mine, kept private for over 20 years. I chose to live modestly because I knew flaunting wealth invites disaster. But this disaster didn't come from strangers. It came from my own family. The hall exploded with reactions. Gasps, sharp whispers, disbelief echoing like waves. One woman blurted out, She's a millionaire?" Another nodded, stunned. All this time she pretended to be poor. The audience's eyes shifted from pity to respect, from skepticism to awe. They looked at me as though I were a character stepping out of a film, a woman revealing her power under the harshest light. Madison's face drained of color, her body stumbling back, her voice cracking. No way. You drive an old car, wear cheap sweaters, you can't have that money." I stared straight at her, my voice even. In America, the truly wealthy don't need to flash cars or shoes. They let the truth speak for itself. Daniel trembled, tears spilling down his cheeks. He staggered forward, gripping the edge of a table, voice breaking. "Mom, please don't do this. I didn't know. I didn't know anything." My chest ached as if torn in two, but my words stayed sharp. "You did know, you just chose not to see." And tonight, when Madison raised her hand and slapped your mother in front of 182 witnesses, you lost the right to see me as your safety net. The words struck like a blade. The room split, some nodding in agreement, others lowering their eyes to avoid the weight of the truth. Phones were now raised high, recording feverishly, guests aware they were capturing a moment destined to explode across social media. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number appeared. "Petition for competency review is being drafted. Be ready." My heart clenched. I knew immediately Madison and her family would not sit quietly. They would strike back, trying to paint me as senile, incapable, to seize control of my estate. I lifted my gaze, locking eyes with the dozens of phone cameras pointed at me. My voice carried through the hall, calm yet charged with force. "Whoever among you wants to see justice, keep your videos. Don't delete them. Don't stay silent. Everything happening tonight will be evidence. The truth will need the courage of each of you." The ballroom froze. Only heavy breathing, the scrape of chairs, the pounding of hearts filled the silence. A new battle had just begun, not only here in Magnolia Hall, but out there, in courtrooms, across social media, and within families' living rooms. And I knew, from this moment forward, there was no turning back. If my enemies were prepared to smear me to steal what wasn't theirs, could I transform my life into a mirror of truth for the world to see? That question burned as the night pressed on, the chandelier light flickering above, bearing witness. I knew the guests weren't only craving a dramatic scene of revenge. They wanted to witness intelligence, precision, and the icy calculation of a woman pushed to her limit. My plan wasn't about throwing slaps back or spitting bitter words. It was a strategy, a map drawn long before tonight with every move calculated. Magnolia Hall, on this very wedding night, would transform into a courtroom under chandeliers, where truth would be exposed before hundreds of witnesses, and thousands more would see it online. The first rule, never fall into the trap of a shouting match. Madison thrived on provocation, and Daniel was easily swayed. If I reacted emotionally, I'd lose instantly. So my principle was simple. No useless words, only documents, contracts, statements, signed, stamped, undeniable. The second rule, no humiliating them just to feed my pride. I would expose only what I could prove. If Madison insulted me publicly, the proof would be video clips from guests' phones. If they spun lies, I had my journals, my witnesses, my financial records. No fabrication. Truth alone was enough to slice through their false facade. The third rule, I wasn't expecting them to kneel and apologize that night. My goal was to cut away the safety net I'd strung for 3 years. Without the secret monthly transfers, without the guarantee on their lease, With the wedding collapsing in real time, they'd be forced to face real consequences. Without leaning on me, they'd finally learn the weight of responsibility. Victor's briefcase carried the tools of this plan, documents they couldn't deny, bank statements from 36 months, totaling $186,000 I'd funneled to Daniel and Madison, listing credit card bills, car insurance, overdue rent, every line dated and coded. Evidence: bank statement 2021 to 2024, total $186,000. The Magnolia Hall contract signed under my name, guaranteeing $68,500 in wedding costs. Canceling it legally, instantly plunging them into a cash crisis mid-ceremony. Evidence: ballroom contract 2023, Eleanor Brooks listed as guarantor. The lease guarantor letter for Daniel and Madison's apartment, signed by me, with copies held by the landlord. Revoking it meant 30 days to find a replacement, or face eviction. Evidence: lease guarantor letter 2022, signed by Eleanor Brooks. Photos of my bruised cheek after the slap, paired with guests' videos. These weren't only proof of Madison's violence, but also my defense against their inevitable claim that I'd lost control. Evidence: photo and video, timestamp 2045, ballroom. I had witnesses lined up. Walter Green, my neighbor, had overheard Madison scheming on the phone. "We'll stay in her condo until we buy our own." Mr. Martinez, the ballroom manager, would attest to the revoked guarantee. And the crowd itself, hundreds of guests recording, becoming an impromptu jury of the night. Victor, my legal and financial advisor, was my anchor. He carried every notice: lease revocation, transfer cancellations, event guarantee termination, and the amended will. Each document was another blade, slicing their illusions apart. And then there was social media. In this age, I didn't need reporters or headlines, just a handful of clips spreading on TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. I wouldn't need to smear them. Truth alone, once shared, would become the loudest verdict. With the crowd's eyes and cameras, every attempt to discredit me would collapse. I had staged the plan as cuts, each about 3 minutes long, just enough time for the crowd to absorb one blow before the next landed. Cut 1. Lease revocation. When Victor announced it, Daniel would reel in shock, never realizing I was the guarantor. The fear of losing their roof would tear open their pride. Cut 2. Ending the transfers. The revelation of $186,000. Jaw-dropping enough to turn whispers into roars. The audience would understand instantly who was dependent on whom. Cut 3. Canceling the wedding guarantee. This would detonate the celebration itself, turning luxury into catastrophe. When Martinez demanded immediate payment, no guest could deny the truth. Cut 4. The will. The killing blow. When Victor read that the estate would go to a foundation protecting elders, their fantasy of inheritance would evaporate. No more stories of the senile old woman, not when the world saw me take full control. Every strike was public, witnessed, and legal. But I knew they wouldn't surrender. The anonymous text warning me of a competency petition proved their next move. They'd try to label me confused, incapable, unfit. But I had prepared for that too. Victor had already filed an affidavit from my longtime doctor, confirming my sharp memory and full mental capacity. He had the slap video preserved, plus my journals documenting 2 years of manipulation. All of it formed an iron shield. If they truly filed the petition, we'd counter with abuse of process, calling out their attempt to misuse the courts for profit. On top of that, Victor had prepared a countersuit for elder financial abuse. Once filed, Madison and her family wouldn't just lose their credibility. They'd face criminal investigation. My plan was crystal clear. Each move shining under legal light, every piece of evidence cutting like a blade. I wasn't the humiliated mother shrinking in the corner anymore. I was the plaintiff. I was the one choosing the battleground. And tonight, that battleground was this glittering ballroom, where chandeliers didn't light the dance floor, but the most public trial they'd ever face. The crowd held its breath. But I knew, the real war hadn't even begun. The question wasn't whether I'd win tonight. It was this: when the final cut landed, would Daniel still be my son, or would he be the first defendant in my courtroom of light? The music in the ballroom had long since stopped, yet the air remained thick with tension, like fog refusing to lift. I looked at Victor, and he gave a single nod. It was time to deliver the final cut, to sever the tangled financial strings Daniel and Madison thought they could hold on to forever. Victor stepped forward, pulling out a notarized stack of papers, his voice booming. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an amendment signed less than an hour ago. According to this document, the entirety of Mrs. Eleanor Brooks' estate will no longer default to her son, Daniel Brooks, or any direct heir. Instead, all assets will transfer into the Eleanor Brooks Foundation for Elder Dignity. The ballroom erupted like thunder. Madison froze in place, then screamed hysterically, "No! You can't do this! That money belongs to the family." Victor turned, his eyes like steel. "Incorrect. The Constitution of the United States protects the freedom to distribute personal property as one sees fit. No one, not even a child, can force a parent to draft a will against their will. This is a constitutional right protected by law." Daniel swayed, gripping the table's edge to stay upright. Foundation? Mom, you're cutting me off completely?" His voice cracked, trembling with sobs. I met his eyes, my tone calm but unyielding. "I didn't cut you off. You and Madison cut yourselves off. When you stood silent while she humiliated me in public, you chose the side of silence. And silence has a price." At that moment, Mr. Martinez, the manager of Magnolia Hall, stepped up to the stage. His voice was no longer polite but sharp with authority. "I'm sorry, but we require payment immediately. Check, card, or cash. Without it, this event must be terminated." The room exploded with chatter. Guests stirred, some pulling on coats, ready to leave. A middle-aged woman whispered to her husband, "I can't believe it. They threw a lavish wedding and can't even pay?" A group of young guests recorded live, their commentary buzzing. "This will be the hottest clip in Charleston tonight." Madison shrieked, her voice sharp and grating. "This is my wedding day. You can't do this. I'll pay later." Martinez shook his head, calm but firm. "No, ma'am. The contract is explicit. Without a guarantee, full payment must be made immediately." The weight of social judgment crashed onto the couple. Daniel trembled, looking around for sympathy, but none came. Instead of pity, all they found were the cold, cutting stares of hundreds of witnesses. I raised my hand. As planned, Victor had arranged for the ballroom's technician to switch on the projector. A massive screen lit up, displaying a detailed chart of 3 years' worth of transfers. Every month, every transaction, totaling $186,000. The figure glared down like a blade. Gasps rippled across the room. "Oh my God, she paid their debts for 3 years?" one guest whispered. Another murmured, "And they dared to humiliate her?" I stepped forward, my voice clear and heavy like a hammer. 3 years ago, I saved you from bankruptcy. I paid your bills, your credit cards, your rent, your insurance. Tonight, I am saving you from the bankruptcy of character. Because if I kept letting you lean on me, you would never learn the meaning of dignity." The words sliced clean. Daniel collapsed, falling to his knees on the polished floor, burying his face in his hands. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't realize it would come to this." Madison, frantic, lunged at me, trying to snatch Victor's documents. But 2 security guards intercepted her, holding her in place. Her pristine white gown twisted, her hair fell loose, her face contorted with rage. Every phone camera caught the moment. The son crumpled in despair, the bride thrashing in her gown, and the mother standing tall, calmly presenting evidence. The ballroom had become a courtroom where no excuses could hold. Victor checked his watch, then looked at me with a firm nod. "Every step is complete." I drew a long breath, my heart heavy but lighter than it had been in years. I knew this moment marked the end of being the mother who quietly slipped envelopes of cash to save her grown son. From now on, I was the woman who drew boundaries, who faced consequences head-on. The guests rose to their feet. Some clapped, others shook their heads, but all knew they had witnessed an irreversible turning point. Madison screamed through tears, Daniel knelt broken, and I walked off the stage with my back straight, clutching the folder of signed documents. I knew this wouldn't be the end. The anonymous text warning about a competency petition still echoed in my mind. The legal battle ahead would be fierce, but tonight, under the dazzling chandeliers, I had reclaimed control of my life. And for the first time, I felt relief in letting the truth stand bare. The air inside the ballroom was so heavy it felt suffocating. I stood beneath the dazzling chandeliers, locking eyes with my son. Daniel was on his knees on the wooden floor, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling. I let my voice rise, slow but resolute, each word dropping like a verdict. "Daniel, You chose silence when your wife humiliated me. You stood there, head bowed, as this woman struck me across the face in front of hundreds of witnesses. That silence was complicity. From this moment on, you will bear full responsibility for your debts, for your shame, for the life you have chosen." Daniel whimpered, burying his face in his hands. I turned to Madison, restrained by security, her gown disheveled, makeup streaking down her face. My voice was sharp, but I didn't need to shout. "Madison, your youth is your greatest asset. Your hands could have been used to build a career, to support, to create a family. Instead, you chose to use them to strike a mother, the very woman who guaranteed your contracts, paid your debts, rescued you and your husband from collapse. Hands are meant for work, not for humiliation. And tonight, everyone has seen the choice you made." The hall was dead silent except for Daniel's muffled sobs and Madison's ragged breathing. Victor stepped forward, opening his briefcase, and began handing over the documents. He placed before Daniel and Madison each notice: the termination of transfers, the lease guarantee revocation, the cancelled wedding guarantee, and the amended will. His voice was steady. "All are effective immediately. There is no escape." From the crowd, Walter Green, my neighbor, rose with a folder in hand. He lifted his notes high. "I am Eleanor's neighbor. I overheard Madison telling her mother her condo is prime real estate. Once we move her into a smaller place, we'll live there until we buy our own. I also personally saw Madison bring a realtor to measure the balcony. I will sign a statement to confirm this." The silence shattered into loud chatter. Several guests had already begun uploading videos. On glowing phone screens, the hashtag #ElderDignityCharleston appeared, multiplying by the minute. Clips of Madison slapping me, of Daniel collapsing to his knees, of Madison screaming in her wedding gown, all spreading like wildfire. I knew Madison's next move would be to claim I was senile, that I was confused by age. But with dozens of videos from guests, with Walter's testimony, and with undeniable financial records, their smear campaign would backfire. Instead of painting me as incompetent, they had exposed themselves as predators of elder financial abuse. On their wedding day, I no longer looked at Daniel or Madison. I turned toward Mr. Martinez, the manager of Magnolia Hall, and pulled a small stack of white cards from my pocket. I handed him one. My voice calm. "If you truly want to make this day meaningful, consider donating to the Eleanor Brooks Foundation for Elder Dignity instead of gifting wedding presents to the bride and groom." Martinez blinked in surprise, then nodded slowly. A few guests began clapping, tentative at first, then swelling louder, filling the ballroom. Those claps were no longer for the couple, but for the truth revealed. Some guests came to shake my hand before leaving. Others bowed their heads in respect. Madison collapsed into a chair, her face contorted beneath ruined makeup. Daniel remained on his knees, his eyes hollow, his hands slack at his sides. That image, the fallen bride, the broken groom, and the mother standing tall, was the final judgment of the night. I walked slowly, clutching the brown envelope, my voice narrating like the close of a chapter. I left Magnolia Hall with my dignity, and left the bill exactly where it belonged. I knew the battle wasn't over. Ahead lay the courts, the threats, the petition meant to strip my autonomy. But tonight, I had won the first victory, justice served under the chandeliers before all of Charleston. And from here, everything was only just beginning. 30 days after the wedding night, everything collapsed exactly as predicted. Daniel and Madison received an official notice from their landlord. The apartment guarantee had been revoked, the lease terminated within the month. They had 30 days to vacate. At the same time, Magnolia Hall filed suit, demanding full payment of $68,500 in event costs. Their bank slashed their credit limit to the bare minimum once the $5,000 monthly transfers from me were gone. Bills piled up while they panicked, scrambling for a way out. In desperation, they hired a lawyer and filed a petition asking the court to review my competency, claiming I was not of sound mind and acted under emotional distress when changing the will. But the court dismissed it swiftly. The video of Madison slapping me in the ballroom, the affidavit from my longtime physician affirming my memory and cognition were intact, and the detailed journals I kept of every manipulative act, all of it exposed their lie. The judge not only denied their petition, but ordered them to pay all my legal fees. Another blow, this time from the justice system itself. 6 months later, I began telling my story publicly. I accepted an invitation to the local talk show Low Country Voices. On air, I spoke about the philosophy of hidden wealth and the importance of boundaries and family. I didn't speak with bitterness, but with a calm, measured voice. The broadcast clip reached 2.1 million views in just a few weeks. Letters, emails, even personal visits arrived from people thanking me for speaking out. I realized I hadn't only reclaimed dignity for myself, I had given it back to thousands of elders enduring greed and manipulation from within their own families. 12 months after the wedding, the Eleanor Brooks Foundation for Elder Dignity officially opened its doors. We launched a hotline, and in just the first 3 months, more than 300 cases sought help. 4 severe cases were handed to prosecutors, triggering investigations into elder financial abuse. Sitting in my new office, watching volunteers answer calls, I felt peace. What had once been my private pain had transformed into collective strength for a community. Daniel still sends the occasional text. The message is always the same. Mom, I need money. I don't block his number, but I don't reply. In my heart I whisper, when you learn to say a real apology, I'll listen. But if all you can do is hold out your hand for money, I'll remain silent. And so the narrator lowers her voice, soft as a final whisper. I am still a mother, but no longer a bank. I am the keeper of dignity. The question lingers, will Daniel ever find the character he lost, or will he live forever in the shadow of his own greed? The night at Magnolia Hall did not end with fading music, but with a lesson that cannot be erased. I walked out of the ballroom with the brown envelope in hand, not to boast, not to take cruel revenge, but to prove a simple truth. Hidden wealth is not about looking down on the world. Hidden wealth is about ensuring the world cannot push you down. We, as Americans, value family love. But love never means paying endlessly for someone else's mistakes. Children may need support, but when support turns into shackles, when it becomes a tool for manipulation and humiliation, it is time to cut the cord. Boundaries are the greatest gift you can give yourself. They are also the most valuable lesson you can give the people you love. When Daniel bowed his head in silence while his wife humiliated me, he learned an expensive truth. Silence is also a choice, and choices carry consequences. Justice doesn't have to be shouted. Justice doesn't need flowery words or heated arguments. Justice is a contract signed, a bank statement that cannot be denied, evidence held up to the light. Tonight, the ballroom became a courtroom under chandeliers, and justice spoke loud enough for all to hear. If you have ever witnessed your parents or loved ones being gaslit, being financially exploited, share your story in the comments. I will read every one. If you want to follow the journey of the Eleanor Brooks Foundation and hear about real cases where elders stood victorious, hit subscribe. And if this story reminds you of someone who needs a shield of dignity, share this now. Justice begins with a boundary spoken aloud.